Little girl pointed at the soldier's grave and cried the veteran's single dad nearby couldn't speak. Because the moment she whispered, "He visits me in my dreams," the battle-hardened man realized she was talking about the brother-in-arms who died saving his life, and what came next would shatter everything he thought he'd buried. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun painted long shadows across Willow Creek Cemetery's perfectly lined headstones. American flags fluttered gently in the spring breeze, their stars and stripes catching the golden light. Ethan Cole walked slowly between the rows, his daughter Lily's small hand warm in his own. His old service jacket felt heavier today. Maybe it was the weight of memories, or maybe just the morning dew that clung to the fabric. Either way, it reminded him of places he'd rather forget. Dusty streets and midnight patrols that still visited his dreams. "Daddy, look, there's Grandpa's flag," Lily said, pointing to a small marker that stood proud and straight. Her voice carried the innocent excitement that only a 6-year-old could maintain in a cemetery. Ethan managed a small smile. "That's right, sweetheart. Want to put your flowers down?" Lily nodded, her pigtails bouncing. She clutched a modest bouquet of daisies, tied with a yellow ribbon she'd picked out herself. Kneeling carefully in her Sunday dress, she arranged the flowers just so, making sure each stem lay perfectly. "Do you think Grandpa can see them?" she asked, looking up at Ethan with those big brown eyes. Mara's eyes. The question caught in Ethan's chest. 3 years since losing Mara, and sometimes their daughter's simple questions still knocked the wind right out of him. "I'm sure he can, Lilypad. Just like Mama can." They stood there for a moment, the morning breeze rustling through nearby maple trees. Ethan's mind wandered to Sunday dinners at his father-in-law's house, back when Mara was still with them. The old man had always saved the crossword puzzle for Ethan, claiming his eyes weren't what they used to be. But Ethan knew better. It was his way of making sure his son-in-law felt like family. "Can we visit Mr. Tom too?" Lily asked softly. Ethan's throat tightened. "Sure thing, kiddo." They walked 3 rows over, where a newer headstone stood among its weathered neighbors. Thomas Tom Parker. The inscription read, along with dates that were far too close together, and the words, "Greater love hath no man than this." Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a bronze star medal, its surface catching the morning light. He'd earned it in that last firefight, the one that took Tom. Somehow, it had never felt right to keep it. Kneeling down, he placed the medal carefully against the cool stone. "I'm still trying, brother," he whispered, his voice rough. The words felt inadequate, like they always did. "How do you thank someone for trading their life for yours?" The memories came anyway, uninvited but vivid. The crack of gunfire, Tom's shout of warning, the explosion that should have killed Ethan, except Tom had pushed him clear. Some nights, Ethan still woke up tasting Afghan dust, hearing Tom's last words. "Tell Grace I'm sorry." Grace, Tom's fiancée. Ethan had delivered the news himself, watching another life shatter. Because he'd survived instead of Tom. He hadn't seen her since the funeral. Lily stood quietly beside him, somehow understanding these moments needed silence. She was good that way, seemed to know things a 6-year-old shouldn't, just like her mother had. A gentle tug on his sleeve pulled Ethan from his thoughts. "Daddy," Lily whispered, pointing down the row. Ethan followed her gesture and felt the world tilt sideways. A little girl in a blue dress stood a few rows away, staring at Tom's grave. She couldn't have been much older than Lily, with honey-colored hair falling past her shoulders. But it was her expression that made Ethan's heart stop. Pure recognition, and grief too deep for a child's face. The girl raised her hand, pointing directly at Tom's headstone. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered words that sent ice through Ethan's veins. "He talks to me in my dreams." Ethan stood frozen, unable to move or speak. The girl's words echoed in his head. Impossible, and yet, Tom's laugh had always been distinctive. A deep, rolling sound that started in his chest. The way he'd tap his right boot twice before standing up. The Celtic cross tattoo on his left forearm that he'd gotten after his first tour. All the little details that had died with him, that no one else would know. The morning breeze picked up, sending flags snapping against their poles. Somewhere nearby, a mourning dove called out its lonely song. Ethan felt Lily's hand slip into his again, anchoring him to the present moment as his mind struggled to make sense of what he was seeing. The little girl in the blue dress continued to stare at Tom's grave, tears streaming down her face. She looked so small standing there among the towering white stones, yet something about her presence filled the entire cemetery. Everything else seemed to fade away. The rustling trees, the distant sound of traffic, even the weight of Ethan's memories, leaving only this impossible moment suspended in the morning light. Ethan's heart thumped against his ribs as he watched the little girl in the blue dress crying at Tom's grave. Her small finger traced the engraved letters of his name, and something about her certainty made his skin prickle. He glanced at Lily, who squeezed his hand tighter. "Stay here with the flowers, sweetheart," he whispered to his daughter. Lily nodded, clutching her bouquet closer. Moving carefully, like approaching a wounded bird, Ethan made his way toward the crying child. Her dark curls bounced as she wiped her eyes with tiny fists. He knelt down, keeping a respectful distance, his knees cracking against the dewy grass. "Hi there," he said softly. "I'm Ethan. Are you okay?" The little girl sniffled and looked up at him with eyes that seemed too old for her young face. "I'm Emma," she said in a small voice. "The soldier wanted me to say thank you." Ethan's throat went dry. "Which soldier?" "The one with the kind eyes." Emma pointed at Tom's headstone. "He comes to see me when I'm sleeping. He has pictures on his arm, pretty stars that look like the ones in the sky." The hair on Ethan's arm stood up. Tom's tattoo had been a constellation of stars running down his right bicep. He'd gotten it after their first tour, saying they were soldiers watching over home. "He told me that," Emma continued, her voice steadier now. "About the stars being soldiers. He laughs when he says it, but not a loud laugh. More like..." She scrunched up her face, thinking. "Like wind through leaves." Ethan sat back on his heels, stunned. That was exactly how Tom had laughed, a soft, whispering chuckle that seemed to come from deep in his chest. "Emma! Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry!" A woman hurried toward them, her sundress swishing around her knees as she walked quickly across the grass. Her brown hair was tied back in a neat ponytail, and worry creased her forehead. "She wandered off while I was visiting my father's grave," the woman explained, reaching for Emma's hand. "I hope she wasn't bothering you. Sometimes she says things." She trailed off, looking uncomfortable. Things she couldn't possibly know. "It's okay," Ethan managed, standing up slowly. His legs felt unsteady. "I'm Ethan Cole." "Grace Parker," she replied, offering a warm smile despite her evident concern. "We're fairly new to town. I just started teaching 3rd grade at Willow Creek Elementary." Parker, the same last name as Tom's grave. Ethan's mind raced, but he kept his voice steady. "Welcome to Willow Creek. How long have you been here?" "About 2 months now." Grace smoothed Emma's curls. "We needed a fresh start, and this seemed like a good place for it." She glanced at Tom's headstone, then quickly away. "Emma, honey, we should let this nice man get back to his family." "But Mommy," Emma protested. "The soldier wanted..." "Emma." Grace's tone was gentle but firm. "We've talked about this. I'm sorry," she added to Ethan. "She has such an active imagination." But Ethan couldn't stop staring at Emma, who looked back at him with those knowing eyes. How could she know about the tattoo? About Tom's laugh? "Daddy?" Lily's voice broke through his thoughts. She'd wandered over, still holding her bouquet. "Can I give the lady one of our flowers?" "Of course, sweetheart." Ethan watched as Lily carefully selected a daisy and handed it to Grace. "Thank you, that's very kind." Grace accepted the flower with a genuine smile. "What's your name?" "Lily Cole," his daughter replied. "I'm 6. What a lovely name." Grace's eyes softened. "Emma's 7. Maybe you'll see each other at school next year." Emma had stopped crying and was now watching Lily with interest. "Do you like to draw?" "I love drawing angels. I love drawing." Lily's face lit up. "Daddy, can we..." "We should get going," Grace interrupted gently. "It was nice meeting you both. Come on, Emma." They watched as Grace led Emma away, their figures growing smaller among the rows of white stones. Emma looked back once, waving with her free hand. Lily tugged at Ethan's jacket. "Daddy?" "Yes, baby. Do you think her soldier is real?" Ethan stared at Tom's grave, where Emma had dropped one of her daisies. It lay there beside his name, petals bright against the gray stone. The morning breeze ruffled the flower's petals, but it didn't blow away. He couldn't find the words to answer his daughter's question. Rain drummed steadily against the windows of the small white house on Cedar Street. The old maple tree in the front yard cast dancing shadows across the living room floor, its branches swaying in the gentle storm. Inside, darkness wrapped around everything except for the dim glow of the kitchen nightlight Lily's comfort beacon. Ethan Cole sat in his worn leather armchair, the one Mara had picked out years ago. The house creaked and settled around him, but he barely noticed. His eyes were fixed on the framed photograph propped on the coffee table. Two soldiers in desert camo, arms around each other's shoulders, grinning despite the dust and heat. "You always had to be the hero, didn't you?" Ethan whispered to Tom's image. His friend's smile seemed to mock him from beneath the glass, eternally frozen in that moment, before everything changed. The memory crashed over him like a wave-hot Afghan sun. The whistle of incoming mortar fire. Tom's voice cutting through the chaos. "Cole! On your 6!" Then hands shoving him hard, sending him sprawling behind a concrete barrier. The explosion. The dust. Tom's last words spoken through blood-stained lips. "You've got someone waiting for you." Ethan's fingers curled around the arm of the chair. "I had Mara then," he said to the empty room. "But she's gone too now. So what was it all for, Tom?" Thunder rolled outside, distant but growing closer. Ethan pushed himself up from the chair, his bad knee protesting the movement. He walked down the hallway, checking on Lily like he did every night. The door creaked softly as he pushed it open. His daughter lay curled on her side, golden hair spread across her pink pillowcase. Her favorite teddy bear, Mr. Buttons, was tucked securely under one arm. In sleep, she looked so much like her mother that it made Ethan's chest ache. "Our Father who art in heaven," the whispered words stopped him in the doorway. Lily's eyes were still closed, but her lips moved in quiet prayer. "Please watch over Daddy, and Mommy in heaven, and Mr. Buttons." She paused, then added, "And please help the blue dress girl who was crying today. She seems sad like Daddy sometimes gets." Ethan's throat tightened. He remembered how naturally Lily had reached for Emma's hand at the cemetery, offering her a daisy from their bouquet. No hesitation, no doubt, just pure, simple kindness. Back in the hallway, Ethan leaned against the wall, letting out a shaky breath. When had he lost that kind of faith? Somewhere between the explosion that took Tom and the illness that stole Mara, he'd stopped believing in anything except survival. But Emma's words echoed in his mind. "He talks to me in my dreams." She described Tom's tattoo, the constellation of Orion on his right shoulder, his personal guardian in the night sky. She'd even mentioned his joke about stars being soldiers watching over home. How could she know these things? Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the hallway. On the small table by the front door, a piece of paper caught Ethan's eye. He walked over and picked it up, a simple flyer from the local church advertising their Memorial Sunday service. "Join us in honoring those who served," it read in clean black letters. "All are welcome." Ethan hadn't set foot in a church since Mara's funeral. The thought of going back, of facing all those hopeful faces and well-meaning words about God's plan. His hand crumpled the edge of the paper, but then he thought of Emma's eyes, full of tears but somehow peaceful. He thought of Lily's simple prayer, offered without doubt or fear. Maybe. He smoothed out the wrinkled flyer and set it back on the table, not quite ready to throw it away. The rain continued its steady rhythm against the windows as Ethan walked to his bedroom, Tom's photo still sitting in the dark living room, watching over the quiet house like one more soldier in the night. Thunder rumbled again, closer now, and Ethan heard small feet padding down the hallway. Moments later, Lily appeared in his doorway, clutching Mr. Buttons. "Daddy," she whispered. "Can I sleep with you? The storm's scary. Come here, sweetheart." He lifted the blanket, and she scrambled in, tucking herself against his side like she used to do when she was smaller. Her presence was warm and real, anchoring him to the present. "Daddy?" she mumbled, already half asleep again. "Yes? Do you think the blue dress girl's okay now?" Ethan stroked her hair, thinking of Emma's tears, of Grace's worried eyes, of Tom's sacrifice. "I hope so, baby," he whispered. "I hope so." The church flyer waited on the table in the hallway, a silent invitation in the storm-dark house. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of Willow Creek Community Church, casting colorful patterns across worn wooden pews and familiar faces. The morning light painted everything in soft amber and rose, making even the old hymnals glow with warmth. Ethan Cole stood at the entrance, his service jacket replaced by a simple blue button-down shirt. His fingers fidgeted with his collar as Lily bounced excitedly beside him in her favorite yellow dress. "Look, Daddy! The windows make rainbows!" Lily pointed to the dancing colors on the floor. Ethan managed a small smile, though his shoulders remained tense. "They sure do, sweetheart." He hadn't stepped foot in a church since Mara's funeral. The familiar smell of old wood and coffee from the fellowship hall brought back memories he'd tried to forget. They slipped into the last pew just as the organ began to play. Lily immediately reached for a hymnal, handling it with careful reverence. She might not know all the words, but she hummed along anyway, swaying slightly to the music. Pastor Daniel Reed stood at the pulpit, his kind face weathered by years of sharing both joy and sorrow with his congregation. His voice carried clearly through the sanctuary. Today, we speak of the messages our loved ones leave behind, not just in words, but in the lives they touched, in the love they shared. Ethan's throat tightened. He focused on his breathing, on the solid wood beneath his hands. Lily leaned against his arm, still humming softly. The choir rose to sing, their voices lifting toward the rafters. As they began, "Amazing Grace," Ethan's eyes drifted across the aisle and froze. There, in the opposite pew, sat Grace Parker and little Emma in her blue dress. Emma noticed them first, her face lighting up as she waved to Lily. The girls shared shy smiles across the space between them, like butterflies testing their wings. The sermon washed over Ethan in waves. Pastor Reed spoke about divine timing, about how God works through people to deliver his messages. "Sometimes," the pastor said, his voice gentle but firm, "the greatest gift we can receive is the reminder that we're not alone in our grief or in our healing." After the final hymn, people began to mill about, voices rising in warm greetings and laughter. Ethan started to guide Lily toward the door, but Pastor Reed appeared beside them, his hand extended. "Ethan Cole," the pastor said warmly, "I've heard your name often in our Veterans Prayer Group. Thank you for your service and for joining us today." Ethan shook his hand, surprised by the strength in the older man's grip. "Thank you, Pastor. It's been a while." "The door is always open," Pastor Reed replied with understanding in his eyes. "And who is this young lady?" Lily stepped forward, suddenly shy but determined. "I'm Lily. I liked the singing." "Well, Lily, we have children's choir practice every Wednesday. You'd be more than welcome." Before Ethan could respond, Grace and Emma approached them. Emma immediately gravitated toward Lily, whispering something that made both girls giggle. "Hello again," Grace said, her smile warm but careful. "It's nice to see you here." The girls were already edging toward the door. "Daddy, can we play outside?" Lily asked, bouncing on her toes. "Please?" Ethan hesitated, but Grace nodded. "The churchyard is fenced in. We can watch them from the fellowship hall." He relented, and the girls darted out into the morning sunshine, their laughter trailing behind them like ribbon in the wind. "Coffee?" Grace gestured toward the fellowship hall, where tables were laden with cookies and steaming carafes. "I promise it's better than the gas station variety." Ethan found himself following her, accepting a styrofoam cup of surprisingly good coffee. They stood by the window, watching Emma and Lily chase each other around the old oak tree in the churchyard. "I didn't mention before," Grace said, "but I teach at Willow Creek Elementary, 2nd grade. Lily will be in 1st grade this fall, right?" "Yeah," Ethan nodded, something in his chest loosening slightly. "She's excited about it. Nervous too, I think." "That's normal. The little ones usually adjust quickly, though." Grace paused, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "I lost someone too, you know, in Afghanistan." The words hung between them, heavy with shared understanding. Ethan looked at her then, really looked at her. He saw the same shadows in her eyes that he saw in his mirror every morning. "I'm sorry," he said softly, meaning it. "Thank you." She smiled, but it held echoes of old pain. "It gets easier, doesn't it? Not better exactly, but easier to carry," Ethan finished, surprising himself with a small laugh. "Yeah, it does." The moment felt natural, like a breath finally released after holding it too long. Grace laughed too, and for a second, the weight of the past seemed to lift slightly. Then she spoke again, her voice casual but clear. "Tom Parker was his name. He was—" The name hit Ethan like a physical blow. Coffee sloshed in his cup as his hand jerked, nearly spilling. The easy moment shattered, replaced by the sound of mortar fire and Tom's last words echoing in his ears. The afternoon sun had softened to a gentle glow as Ethan walked Grace and Emma to their car. His steps felt heavy, each one weighed down by the revelation that still echoed in his mind. Grace Parker, Tom's Grace, the same woman his best friend had shown pictures of, spoken about with such pride and joy during quiet moments between missions. "Thank you for the coffee," Grace said, her smile genuine but touched with sadness. "It's nice to talk to someone who understands." She helped Emma into her booster seat, checking the straps with practiced care. "What do you mean?" Ethan's voice came out rougher than he intended. Grace's hands stilled on Emma's seatbelt. "About losing someone over there, I don't usually discuss it, but..." She straightened up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I was engaged to a soldier. He never made it home." Ethan's throat tightened. He wanted to tell her right then about Tom, about that day, about everything. But when he looked at her face, saw the careful way she held herself together, the words died in his throat. "I'm sorry," was all he managed. Emma leaned out her window. "Bye, Lily. See you at school." Her cheerful voice cut through the heavy moment like sunshine through storm clouds. Lily waved back enthusiastically. "Bye, Emma." As Grace's car pulled away, Ethan stood rooted to the spot, watching until they turned the corner. The weight of unspoken truth pressed against his chest like armor. Back home, the evening settled into their usual routine, but nothing felt normal. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, trying to focus as Lily worked on her spelling words. The pencil scratched against paper, each letter carefully formed. "Daddy, how do you spell friend?" Lily asked, her tongue poking out in concentration. "F-R-I-E-N-D, he answered automatically, his mind still in the church parking lot, still hearing Grace's words about her lost fiancé. "Emma's my new best friend," Lily announced, carefully writing the word. "She says we can have a playdate next week. Can we, Daddy? Please?" Ethan looked at his daughter's hopeful face. Fear gnawed at his insides, fear of getting too close, of the truth coming out, of hurting Grace and Emma. But he couldn't deny the way Lily's eyes sparkled when she talked about her new friend. "Sure, sweetie. We'll work something out." "Yes." Lily pumped her fist in the air, nearly knocking over her glass of milk. "Emma says they have a backyard with a swing set." After homework and dinner, after tucking Lily into bed with her favorite stuffed elephant, Ethan found himself in his study. The old wooden desk held a collection of frames, Mara's smile frozen in time, Lily's first day of kindergarten, and there, pushed to the back, the photo he both treasured and dreaded. He pulled it forward now. The desert sun blazed eternal in the image, harsh and bright against two young soldiers' grins. Tom's arm was slung over Ethan's shoulders, both of their faces dusty but happy. It was taken 3 days before the attack. "She deserves peace," he whispered to the photograph, to Tom's frozen smile. "Not my truth." His fingers traced the edge of the frame. "What am I supposed to do, brother?" Thunder rumbled outside, and rain began to tap against the windows. Ethan got ready for bed mechanically, his mind still churning with memories and possibilities. He lay in the darkness of his room, listening to the storm build. Lightning flashed, bright and sudden, filling the room with stark white light. In that brief, electric moment, a shadow seemed to stand by his bedroom door, tall, straight-backed, familiar. Tom's silhouette, as clear as the day they'd said goodbye. Ethan's heart stopped. The lightning faded, plunging the room back into darkness. When the next flash came, the doorway stood empty, but the impression remained, burning behind his eyes like an afterimage. He could have sworn Tom had been there, standing guard as he always had, watching over him one more time. Ethan lay awake for hours after that, the storm raging outside, while an equally powerful tempest built within his heart. Every crack of thunder seemed to whisper Tom's name. Every flash of lightning threatened to reveal that silent sentinel again. The truth hung between worlds, between lightning flashes, between heartbeats, between what was and what could be. In the darkness of his room, Ethan felt its weight more heavily than ever before. Saturday morning sunlight streamed through Ethan's kitchen window, catching dust motes that danced in the golden rays. The warm aroma of maple syrup and fresh pancakes filled the air as he flipped another golden circle onto the growing stack. Lily stood on her step stool beside him, carefully measuring chocolate chips into the batter. "Do you think Emma likes chocolate chip pancakes, Daddy?" Lily asked, her tongue poking out in concentration as she counted each chip. "I think most kids do, sweetheart." Ethan smiled, ruffling her hair. The doorbell chimed, and Lily nearly knocked over her stool in excitement. "They're here!" She scrambled down and ran to the door, her sock feet sliding on the hardwood floor. Ethan wiped his hands on a dish towel and followed, watching as Lily threw open the door. Grace stood on the porch, Emma's small hand in hers. Both wore matching yellow sundresses, and Emma clutched a stuffed rabbit under her free arm. "Something smells amazing," Grace said, stepping inside. Her eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled. "Daddy makes the best pancakes ever," Lily announced proudly. She grabbed Emma's hand. "Come on, I'll show you my butterfly nets." The girls disappeared into the backyard, their giggles trailing behind them. Ethan led Grace to the kitchen, where morning light warmed the worn oak table. "Coffee?" he offered, already reaching for a second mug. "Please." Grace settled into a chair, watching through the window as the girls chased butterflies across the lawn. This is exactly what Emma needed. She's been so quiet lately. Ethan set a steaming mug in front of her and sat down with his own. "How are you settling into Willow Creek?" Grace wrapped her hands around the warm ceramic, her wedding ring catching the light. "It's peaceful here, different from the city I needed." She paused, searching for words. "I needed somewhere new. Somewhere without memories around every corner." Ethan nodded, understanding too well. "What made you choose here? Would you believe me if I said I'm not entirely sure?" She laughed softly. "I was looking at teaching positions all over the state, but when I saw Willow Creek," she shrugged, "something just felt right, like I was supposed to be here." Through the window, Emma's delighted squeal drew their attention. She had caught a monarch butterfly in her net, its orange wings fluttering against the white mesh. Lily clapped excitedly beside her. "Your daughter's wonderful with Emma," Grace said. "It's been hard for her to make friends with everything." "Everything?" Ethan prompted gently. Grace's smile dimmed slightly. "We've spent a lot of time in hospitals. Emma has a heart condition, congenital. She's doing better lately, but..." She trailed off, watching the girls. Ethan felt a familiar ache in his chest, memories of hospital corridors and beeping machines surfacing uninvited. He pushed them away, focusing on the warmth of the coffee in his hands. Later that afternoon, they walked the short distance to Grace's house. The girls skipped ahead, collecting dandelions and making wishes with each puff of seeds they scattered to the wind. "Oh!" Grace pointed to a shutter hanging askew near an upstairs window. "That's been driving me crazy for weeks. The handyman in town is booked until September. I could take a look," Ethan offered before he could stop himself. "I'm pretty good with repairs." 20 minutes later, he was balanced on a ladder while Grace held it steady. The wood was old but solid, just needed new screws and proper alignment. As he worked, they talked about small things, favorite books, funny stories about their kids, the best pizza place in town. "There," Ethan said, testing the shutter one last time. "Good as new." "My hero," Grace teased. And for a moment, everything felt light and easy. As evening approached, they sat on Grace's front porch, watching the girls play with sidewalk chalk. Emma's movements had grown slower, her usual energy fading. She climbed into Grace's lap, eyelids heavy. "Someone's ready for bed," Grace murmured, stroking Emma's hair. The little girl was already asleep, her chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Ethan watched them, feeling an unwanted surge of protectiveness. He recognized the fear in Grace's eyes when she looked at her daughter, the same fear he'd felt watching Mara slip away, the same fear that made him want to run before he could care too much, lose too much. "We should head home," he said softly, standing. "Come on, Lily." Bug. Back at their house, Ethan sat with Lily on the front porch steps. Stars dotted the darkening sky, crickets providing their evening symphony. Lily leaned against his arm, her small hand finding his. "Mr. Tom's probably happy we're friends with his family," she said simply. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He stared up at the stars, unable to speak. Tom's face flashed in his mind, laughing, alive, showing him Grace's picture for the 100th time. The weight of unspoken truth pressed against his chest, caught between gratitude for these new connections and guilt over their foundation. Lily squeezed his hand, content in the quiet moment, while Ethan remained lost in the vast field of stars above. torn between the wonder of fate's design and the burden of secrets still untold. The late spring sun beat down on the old Willow Creek War Memorial as Mayor Thompson addressed the small crowd gathered on the town square. Ethan stood at the back, hands in his pockets, watching as the mayor gestured to the weathered wooden structure behind him. "This memorial has stood here since 1946, the mayor announced, his voice carrying across the square. "It's time we restored it to honor our veterans properly." Grace spotted Ethan from where she stood with the other teachers and made her way over. She wore a light blue blouse that matched the clear morning sky, her honey brown hair caught in the breeze. "They need volunteers," she said softly. "People who understand what these names mean." Ethan shifted his weight, studying the worn memorial. Paint peeled from its wooden panels, and some of the brass plaques had turned green with age. Names of local veterans stretched across decades of service, telling stories of sacrifice and courage. "I don't know, Grace." His voice was hesitant. "I'm better with fixing engines than healing places?" She touched his arm gently. "That's exactly why they need you." The following Saturday, Ethan arrived early with his toolbox and work gloves. Other volunteers trickled in, retired veterans, high school students, and local craftsmen. Grace brought coffee and donuts, while Emma and Lily set up a refreshment station with paper cups of lemonade. "Remember, gentle circles when you sand." Ethan showed Lily how to smooth the rough wood. She mimicked his movements carefully, her small face serious with concentration. Emma watched from her perch on a nearby bench, drawing pictures of flowers in her sketchbook. Throughout the morning, Ethan found himself falling into an easy rhythm. The familiar motions of working with his hands brought comfort, like the maintenance work he used to do on military vehicles. He cleaned brass plaques until they shone, replaced rotting boards, and carefully restored each veteran's name to clarity. "Look what I found!" Emma called out, holding up a faded photograph that had slipped behind one of the panels. It showed young soldiers in old uniforms, standing proud before shipping out to war. Grace walked over and knelt beside her daughter. "Those brave men helped protect our freedom," she explained, her voice soft with reverence. "Just like Mr. Ethan did." Emma's eyes widened as she looked up at Ethan. "Were you scared when you were a soldier?" The question caught him off guard. He set down his sandpaper and considered his answer carefully. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but having good friends made it easier." "Like my dream soldier?" Emma asked innocently. Ethan's throat tightened. He glanced at Grace, who was watching him with gentle understanding in her eyes. "Yeah, sweetheart, just like him." As the days passed, the memorial began to transform. Fresh paint brightened the wood, and the brass plaques gleamed in the sunlight. Ethan found himself looking forward to the work sessions, to Grace's quiet presence, and the girls' laughter as they helped by delivering drinks and snacks to the volunteers. One afternoon, while taking a break in the shade, Grace brought him a cold bottle of water. "You're good with them," she said, nodding toward where Lily and Emma sat making daisy chains. "Emma talks about you all the time at home. She's a special kid." Ethan watched as Emma showed Lily how to link the flowers together. "They both are. She sleeps better now," Grace continued softly. "The dreams about the soldier, they're not sad anymore. She says he's smiling." Ethan's hands stilled on the water bottle. He wanted to tell her everything in that moment. About Tom. About that day in Afghanistan. About the weight he'd carried since. But the words stuck in his throat like sand. Instead, he asked, "How's she feeling? Her health, I mean." "Good days and bad." Grace's voice carried a mother's worry. "But more good lately. The doctors say her heart is stronger than they expected." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the newly restored memorial, the volunteers packed up their tools. Emma wandered over to the wall of plaques, still holding her last daisy chain. She stopped at an empty space where a new plaque would soon be mounted. "This one's for the hero who saved someone," she said clearly, placing her flower crown beneath the blank space. The setting sun caught the petals, turning them to gold. Grace and Ethan both stood frozen, watching her. In that moment, something passed between them, a current of understanding that needed no words. Grace's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled, touching the empty space where Tom's name would soon be. Ethan felt the familiar weight of guilt shift slightly, making room for something else, something that felt almost like peace. Later, as they gathered their things to leave, Lily asked if Emma could come over tomorrow for a tea party. Grace hesitated, looking at Ethan questioningly. "We'd love to have you both," he said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. The girls cheered, already planning their imaginary feast. Grace's smile was soft in the fading light. "Thank you," she whispered, and Ethan knew she meant for more than just the invitation. As they walked to their cars, Emma skipping ahead with Lily, Grace touched Ethan's arm. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "the best way to honor those we've lost is to keep loving the ones who are still here." Ethan watched their daughters dancing in the twilight, their shadows stretching long behind them. For the first time in years, the memory of Tom brought not just pain, but also a glimpse of something like hope. Summer settled over Willow Creek like a warm blanket, bringing with it a sense of peace Ethan hadn't felt in years. The familiar routines of small-town life wrapped around him, filling empty spaces he'd forgotten existed. At Willow Creek Elementary's spring fair, Ethan manned the cotton candy machine, his military precision creating perfect pink clouds that delighted the children. Grace worked the face-painting booth nearby, transforming giggling faces into butterflies and superheroes. Emma and Lily bounced between them, their cheeks sticky with sugar and decorated with glittering stars. "Daddy, can we do another song for church next Sunday?" Lily asked one evening during dinner. She pushed her peas around her plate, eyes bright with excitement. "Emma knows all the words to This Little Light of Mine now." "If Mrs. Parker says it's okay," Ethan replied, watching his daughter's face light up. The girls had become a hit at Sunday services, their sweet voices rising clear and strong during the children's performances. Sunday dinners at Grace's house became a cherished tradition, her small kitchen filled with the scent of pot roast or chicken and dumplings, recipes passed down from her grandmother. Ethan would arrive early to help, chopping vegetables while Grace stirred sauces and shared stories about her students. "You wouldn't believe what Tommy Jenkins said in class today," she'd laugh, her eyes crinkling at the corners. The sound of her laughter made his heart lighter, even as Tom's name, different Tom, wrong Tom, sent a familiar pang through his chest. Late-night phone calls became routine too. When Emma had trouble sleeping, Lily would insist on calling to say goodnight. The conversations would start with the girls, but often end with Ethan and Grace talking long after their daughters had drifted off, sharing quiet thoughts about life, loss, and healing. "I never thought I'd feel this settled again," Grace admitted one night, her voice soft through the phone. "After Tom, I thought that part of my life was over." Ethan gripped the phone tighter, the weight of his secret pressing against his chest. "Life has a way of surprising us," he managed to say, thinking of how Tom had always believed in second chances. The War Memorial Project continued, becoming a symbol of renewal for the whole town. Ethan spent weekend mornings working alongside other volunteers, replacing rotted boards and polishing brass plates until they gleamed. The girls would bring them lemonade, singing made-up songs about heroes and friendship. One particularly warm evening, after most volunteers had gone home, Ethan stood alone before the memorial. The setting sun painted the fresh white paint in shades of gold and pink. His fingers traced the empty space where new names would soon be added, including Tom's. He didn't hear Grace approach until she spoke. "You've become part of what this town was missing, you know." She stood beside him, close enough that he could smell the light floral scent of her shampoo, a reminder that good men still exist. Ethan's throat tightened. If she only knew. The man she thought him to be existed because of Tom's sacrifice, a truth that grew heavier with each passing day. He managed a smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "The town's done more for me than I could ever do for it." Grace touched his arm gently, the way she did sometimes when words weren't enough. In moments like these, he could almost believe he deserved this. The peace, the friendship, the possibility of more, almost. Later that night, after Lily had fallen asleep clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit, Ethan sat at his desk and opened the bottom drawer. The metal was cool against his fingers as he lifted out Tom's dog tag. The fluorescent desk lamp caught the stamped letters, making them stand out stark and clear. Parker, Thomas J. He closed his fist around the tag, feeling the edges press into his palm. "I'll tell her soon," he whispered into the quiet room. The words felt both like a promise and a prayer, though he wasn't sure anymore who he was praying to, God, Tom, or maybe just the universe itself. The dog tag seemed heavier than it had any right to be, weighted with unsaid words and moments that could never be changed. He thought of Emma's dreams, of Grace's quiet strength, of how Tom had always said everything happened for a reason. But sitting there in the dark, that reason felt more elusive than ever. Lily's voice drifted from her room. She was talking in her sleep again, something about butterflies and Emma. The sound anchored him back to the present, to this life he'd been given. This life Tom had given him. "I'll tell her soon," he repeated, softer this time, and placed the dog tag back in its drawer. Above his desk, a photo of him and Tom in Afghanistan caught his eye, both of them grinning, arms around each other's shoulders, desert sun blazing overhead. Young and invincible, or so they'd thought. The drawer closed with a soft click, but the weight of its contents stayed with him, as constant as his own heartbeat. Thunder rolled across Willow Creek like distant artillery fire. Ethan sat in his truck outside Grace's modest white house, rain drumming against the roof. He'd left Lily with Mrs. Henderson next door, the elderly neighbor who always smelled like cookies and kept her porch light on late. His hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. The truth had become too heavy to carry alone. Each shared smile, each moment of connection with Grace, felt tainted by what he knew. Tom's dog tags lay cold against his chest, a constant reminder. Lightning flashed, illuminating Grace's kitchen window. She moved inside, a gentle shadow behind curtains. Ethan took a deep breath and stepped out into the rain. Before he could knock, Grace opened the door. "Ethan?" Surprise and concern mixed in her voice. "You're soaked. Come in, please." The house smelled like chamomile tea and cinnamon. Emma's drawings covered the fridge, bright crayon sketches of flowers and smiling faces. A small lamp cast warm light across family photos on the wall. "I was just making tea," Grace said, pulling out a second mug. Perfect timing for this weather. She wore simple blue pajama pants and an oversized sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. "Is everything okay?" "I needed to talk," Ethan said, his voice rougher than intended. Water dripped from his jacket onto the kitchen tile. "About Tom." Grace's hand stilled on the kettle. "Here," she said softly, handing him a dish towel. "Dry off a bit. We can sit in the living room." They settled onto her worn couch, thunder still growling outside. Family photos lined the mantelpiece, Grace in a graduation gown, Emma as a baby. And there, Tom in his dress uniform, smile bright and confident. "I've been thinking about him more lately," Grace said, curling her feet under her. Steam rose from their mugs like prayer. "Maybe because of Emma's dreams. Or maybe," she glanced at Ethan, "because you remind me of him sometimes. That same quiet strength." Ethan's throat tightened. He stared into his tea, watching ripples form from his trembling hands. "We wrote so many letters," Grace continued, reaching for a small wooden box on the coffee table. "Even with email, he loved sending actual paper letters. Said it felt more real." She pulled out a stack tied with faded ribbon. "He would describe the stars over there, say they looked like diamonds scattered on black velvet." Ethan remembered those stars. Remembered Tom pointing them out during long night watches, telling stories about the constellations. "The ring's in here too." Grace opened a smaller box, revealing a simple diamond on a silver band. "He had it sent home just before." Her voice caught. "Just before the end. Said he wanted me to have it even if..." She pressed her lips together. Lightning flashed again, closer now. Ethan's eyes burned with unshed tears. The words sat heavy on his tongue. "I was there. He died saving me. You should hate me." "Sometimes," he said instead, voice barely above a whisper, "I dream about them, other soldiers, calling my name in the dark." Grace set down her tea and took his hand. Her touch was warm, steady. "Maybe they're not calling you back," she said gently. "Maybe they're reminding you to live." The simple wisdom of her words struck him like physical pain. She had no idea how close to home they hit, that Tom's last words had been about choosing life, about moving forward. Thunder crashed overhead, making the windows rattle. Ethan stood abruptly, unable to bear the kindness in Grace's eyes for one more moment. "I should go," he managed. "Lily." "Of course." Grace walked him to the door, concern evident in her expression. "Drive safely, okay?" The rain had intensified, sheets of water reflecting his headlights as he stepped outside. Ethan paused on the porch, water running down his face, mixing with tears he could finally let fall. "I can't hurt her again," he whispered to the storm. The words disappeared into thunder, lost in the darkness of a night that felt endless. The May sunshine warmed the elementary school playground, as children's laughter filled the air. Colorful banners fluttered in the breeze, announcing Willow Creek Elementary Field Day. Parents lined the makeshift racetracks marked with white chalk, phones ready to capture memories. Ethan stood near the finish line, his camera focused on Lily and Emma as they waited for their turn in the three-legged race. The girls had practiced all week in his backyard, giggling as they mastered their synchronized steps. Their matching pink ribbons bounced with each practice hop. Grace sat in her folding chair nearby, grading papers between events. She looked up occasionally to wave at Emma, her smile bright and proud. The past few weeks had brought them all closer, weaving their lives together like a comfortable blanket. "Next up, second grade," Mrs. Thompson called through her megaphone. "Racers to their marks." Lily and Emma hobbled to the starting line, their ankles tied together with a soft band. Emma's face was flushed with excitement, but Ethan noticed something off in her expression, a slight strain around her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Ready, set, go." The children started forward, some stumbling, others finding their rhythm. Lily and Emma moved well together, staying steady as they made their way down the track. They were neck and neck with another pair, approaching the halfway point. That's when it happened. Emma stumbled, her steps becoming uneven. At first, it looked like a simple loss of balance, but then her face went pale. She tried to take another step and crumpled to the ground, pulling Lily down with her. "Emma!" Grace's scream cut through the cheerful noise of the field day. She was already running, papers scattered behind her like fallen leaves. Ethan reached them first, his heart pounding as he knelt beside Emma. Her eyes were half closed, her breathing shallow and quick. Lily started crying, still attached to her friend's ankle. "Someone call an ambulance!" Grace's voice cracked as she gathered Emma into her arms. "Baby, can you hear me? Emma?" Ethan quickly untied the band connecting the girls, pulling Lily gently aside as teachers rushed over. Mrs. Thompson was already on her phone with emergency services, her voice clear and professional despite the fear in her eyes. "They're 5 minutes out," she reported, kneeling beside them. "Keep her comfortable." Emma stirred slightly, her small hand reaching out. "Mommy?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm here, sweetheart." Grace stroked Emma's hair, trying to keep her voice steady. "Help is coming. Just stay with me." Ethan held Lily close as she sobbed, his own hands shaking. The crowd of children and parents had formed a protective circle, their worried whispers creating a low hum of concern. Some parents ushered their children away, trying to maintain calm. The wail of sirens grew closer. The paramedics worked quickly, their movements precise and practiced. They asked Grace questions about Emma's condition, about her medications. Ethan listened, his military training kicking in as he helped keep the area clear and calm. "I'm riding with her," Grace said as they loaded Emma into the ambulance. Her voice held no room for argument. "I'll follow with Lily," Ethan called out. "We'll be right behind you." The drive to the hospital was a blur of red lights and worried silence. Lily clutched her stuffed bear, the one Emma had given her last week, and whispered prayers she'd learned in Sunday school. At the hospital, they found Grace in the emergency waiting room, her head in her hands. Ethan sent Lily to sit with her while he spoke with the nurses, gathering information with the steady patience he'd learned in combat. Hours passed like molasses. Mrs. Henderson came to take Lily home, promising to keep her overnight. The hospital corridors grew quieter as evening settled in, but Ethan stayed, bringing Grace coffee she barely touched and sitting beside her in silence. "She's stabilized," the doctor finally reported sometime after midnight, "but her heart condition has progressed faster than we anticipated. We're looking at possible surgery in the near future." Grace's sob caught in her throat. Ethan wrapped an arm around her shoulders, letting her cry against his chest. His own eyes burned with tears he refused to let fall. In Emma's room, machines beeped steadily. The little girl looked tiny in the hospital bed, her blue dress replaced by a pale gown. Grace sat beside her, holding her hand, while Ethan stood by the window. The night stretched on. Ethan watched the stars appear and disappear behind clouds, his thoughts turning to prayer for the first time since Tom died. It wasn't a formal prayer, just a desperate plea to whatever power might be listening. "Please," he whispered, so quietly even he barely heard it. Not her, Not again. Around 4 in the morning, Emma stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, focusing slowly on the room. "Mommy?" Grace leaned forward instantly. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." Emma's voice was faint but clear. The man in the light said not to be afraid. Ethan moved closer to the bed, his heart skipping. He took Emma's small hand in his, unable to stop the tears that finally spilled down his cheeks. When he looked up, he caught Grace's gaze. The fear and worry in her eyes had softened into something else, something like hope, or maybe even understanding. The machines kept their steady rhythm as dawn approached, marking each precious heartbeat in the quiet room. The evening sun cast long shadows through Grace's kitchen window as she stirred a pot of homemade chicken soup. Emma rested upstairs, still tired from her hospital stay but improving day by day. The doorbell chimed, and Grace's heart skipped. She knew it would be Ethan. She opened the door to find him standing there, holding a paper bag filled with fresh bread from the local bakery. His eyes were tired but kind, just like they had been during those long hours in the hospital. "Come in," Grace said softly. "Emma's sleeping, but she'll be happy to know you came by." Ethan stepped into the warm kitchen, placing the bread on the counter. "How's she doing?" "Better. The doctors say she needs rest, but her heart's showing improvement." Grace ladled soup into ceramic bowls, the steam rising in delicate swirls. "I wanted to thank you, Ethan, for everything." They sat at the small kitchen table, where Grace had set out placemats and napkins. The soup's aroma filled the air with comfort and home. "You don't need to thank me," Ethan said, breaking off a piece of warm bread. "Anyone would have done the same." Grace shook her head. "No, not anyone. You stayed all night. You held my hand when I couldn't stop crying. That's more than just being kind." They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the clink of spoons against bowls the only sound. Through the window, birds flitted between tree branches, their shadows dancing across the tablecloth. "It reminds me of how Tom used to take care of people," Grace said suddenly, her voice soft with memory. "He always knew exactly what to do when someone was hurting." Ethan's spoon paused halfway to his mouth. He set it down carefully, trying to hide the trimmer in his hand. Grace stood and walked to a small desk in the corner. She pulled out an old photo from a drawer and returned to the table. "I keep this one close," she said, holding it out. "It was the last picture he sent me from over there." Ethan's face went pale as he stared at the photograph. The same desert backdrop, the same confident smile he saw every day on his own shelf at home. Tom Parker, forever frozen in time, wearing his combat gear and flashing that trademark grin that could light up the darkest day. "He was my fiancé," Grace said, her finger tracing the edge of the photo. Ethan's throat felt like sandpaper. The words came out barely above a whisper. "He was my brother in arms." Grace's head snapped up, her eyes searching his face. The kitchen seemed to grow smaller, the air thicker. "What did you say?" Her voice quivered. Ethan's hands gripped the edge of the table. "Tom, he was my best friend in Afghanistan. We served together in the same unit." Grace sat perfectly still, her eyes never leaving his face. The photo trembled in her hands. "There's more," Ethan continued, each word feeling like glass in his throat. "The day he died." "No," Grace whispered. But Ethan forced himself to continue. "We were on patrol. The mortar fire came out of nowhere, Tom." Ethan's voice cracked. "Tom pushed me out of the way. He took the hit that was meant for me." The silence that followed was deafening. Grace stared at the photo, then back at Ethan, her face transforming from confusion to understanding to raw pain. "You lived," she said, her voice rising. "And he didn't." The slap of her hand against the table made the dishes jump. Soup sloshed over the rim of their bowls. "Grace, all this time," she cut him off, standing up so quickly her chair scraped against the floor. "All these weeks, you knew. You knew who he was to me, and you said nothing?" "I wanted to tell you," Ethan said, his voice heavy with regret. "Every day, I wanted to tell you." "Get out." The words were quiet, but sharp as blade. Ethan stood slowly, his legs feeling like lead. He walked to the door, each step echoing in the silence. He paused with his hand on the doorknob, wanting to say more, to explain, to make her understand, but there were no words that could bridge this chasm. The door closed behind him with a soft click that seemed to echo through the empty house, leaving Grace alone with the truth that had shattered their fragile peace. The drive home felt endless. Ethan's hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. Streetlights blurred past as he blinked back tears, trying to keep his vision clear. The weight of Grace's words, her anger, her pain pressed down on his chest like a stone. When he finally pulled into his driveway, the neighbor's porch light spilled across the yard. Mrs. Thompson, who had watched Lily, waved from her window. Ethan forced a smile and walked to her door to collect his daughter. "Daddy!" Lily ran to him, wrapping her small arms around his waist. Her face glowed with innocence, reminding him so much of her mother it hurt. "We made cookies and watched cartoons." "That's great, sweetheart." His voice came out rough. "Thank Mrs. Thompson for me." Back in their house, Lily stopped at the bottom of the stairs, studying his face with those observant eyes that missed nothing. "Why are you sad, Daddy?" Ethan knelt down and pulled her close, breathing in the sweet scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Some mistakes never leave us, baby girl." He held her tighter, as if she could anchor him to something good and pure in this world. The days that followed stretched like a desert. Grace didn't answer his calls. When he drove past the elementary school, her car wasn't in its usual spot. The church felt empty without them on Sunday morning. Lily asked about Emma every day. "When can we see them again? Emma must be lonely." Each time, Ethan's heart cracked a little more. "Not right now, sweetheart. Emma needs rest." He stopped going to the memorial restoration project. The half-finished plaques and bare wood haunted him like unfinished prayers. Other volunteers asked where he'd gone, but he couldn't face their questions. Through the grapevine of small-town whispers, he learned Emma had been readmitted to the hospital. Her heart was struggling again. The news felt like punishment, as if his confession had somehow triggered this downturn. One evening, after tucking Lily into bed, the walls of his house seemed to close in. He grabbed his keys and drove to Willow Creek Cemetery. The moon hung low and full, casting long shadows between the headstones. Ethan found Tom's grave easily, even in the dim light. He'd walked this path so many times. The white stone gleamed like a beacon, Tom's name etched deep and permanent. His knees hit the grass as emotion finally overtook him. "You saved me for this?" His voice cracked in the night air. "To break her again?" Tears fell freely now, spotting the earth beneath him. "I should have died that day. Not you. You had someone waiting. You had love and promise and—" He choked on the words. The cemetery remained silent except for crickets and distant traffic. Wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of summer grass and recent rain. "Daddy?" The small voice startled him. Ethan turned to find Lily standing a few feet away, still in her pajamas with sneakers hastily pulled on. She must have followed him, sneaking into the car without him noticing. In her hand, she clutched something that caught the moonlight, her mother's silver cross necklace, the one Ethan kept in a velvet box on his dresser. "Mr. Tom came in my dream," she said softly, walking closer. Her face held that same serene certainty Emma sometimes showed. "He said you're worth saving." The simple words, spoken with such pure faith, broke something deep inside him. Ethan's shoulders shook as sobs racked his body. Lily wrapped her small arms around his neck, holding him as he'd always held her through her nightmares and scraped knees. The cross necklace dangled between them, catching moonlight like a star fallen to earth. "I miss them too, Daddy," Lily whispered against his hair. "But Mr. Tom says it's gonna be okay." They stayed like that, father and daughter kneeling in the grass, while crickets sang and stars wheeled overhead. In that moment, surrounded by stones that marked endings, Ethan felt something new stir in his heart. Not peace, not yet, but perhaps its first faint echo. The night air grew cooler around them, and distant thunder rumbled somewhere beyond the hills. Morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen curtains, casting a soft glow across the worn wooden table where Ethan Saturday. In his calloused hands, he held Mara's silver cross necklace, the one Lily had brought to the cemetery last night. The metal felt warm against his palm, smooth from years of faithful wear. Lily's cheerful humming drifted down from upstairs where she was getting dressed for the day. The sound wrapped around him like a gentle reminder of hope, even when everything felt broken. He turned the cross over, watching light catch its edges. Lily's words from the cemetery echoed in his mind. Mister, Tom said you're worth saving. His daughter's simple faith had cracked something open inside him, a door he'd kept locked since Afghanistan. The coffee maker gurgled its last drops into the pot, filling the kitchen with its familiar aroma. Ethan poured himself a cup, but barely tasted it. His thoughts kept circling back to Grace's face when he'd told her the truth, the way her eyes had shifted from warmth to betrayal in an instant. "Daddy?" Lily appeared in the doorway, her hair slightly messy from trying to brush it herself. "Are we going to church today?" Ethan's first instinct was to say no, but looking at his daughter's hopeful expression, he knew what he had to do. "Yes, sweetheart, we are." An hour later, they pulled into the church parking lot. It was early, too early for the regular service. But Ethan knew from their conversations that Grace often came here alone on Sunday mornings to pray. "Why don't you go see if Mrs. Thompson needs help setting up the Sunday school room?" he suggested to Lily. She nodded and skipped off, her patent leather shoes clicking against the floor. The main sanctuary was quiet, filtered sunlight streaming through stained glass windows. And there, in the third pew from the front, sat Grace. Her head was bowed, hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked smaller somehow, wrapped in grief and mourning shadows. Ethan's footsteps echoed softly as he approached. Grace didn't turn around, but her shoulders tensed. She knew he was there. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, stopping at the end of her pew. "I should have told you sooner." Grace didn't respond for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was raw. "Did you come here to ease your conscience?" "No." Ethan sat down, leaving space between them. "I came because something happened last night, something I can't explain." He told her about finding Lily at the cemetery, about her dream of Tom. As he spoke, tears began rolling down Grace's cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. "She said he told her I was worth saving." Ethan's voice cracked. "But Grace, the truth is I've spent every day since he died wondering why he chose me over himself. Over you. Over the life you were supposed to have together." Grace turned to look at him then. Really look at him. Her eyes were red-rimmed but clear. "Tom always said everything happens for a reason," she whispered. "I used to believe that. Then he died, and I couldn't understand what reason could be good enough." Sunlight shifted through the windows, painting rainbow patterns across the wooden pews. Somewhere in the distance, church bells began to ring. "Last night," Grace continued, "Emma woke up crying. She said she dreamed about Tom again. He was showing her pictures of you, of Lily, of all of us together." She drew a shaky breath. Maybe Tom's trying to heal us both." The words hung in the air between them, delicate as spider silk but stronger than steel. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out the cross necklace. "This was my wife Mara's," he said softly. "Lily brought it to the cemetery last night. I think she knows something we don't. About faith, about forgiveness." Grace nodded slowly, understanding in her eyes. "Emma's doctor called yesterday. They want to run more tests." She hesitated, then added, Would you come with us? To the hospital?" "Of course," Ethan replied without hesitation. They drove to the hospital together, the morning sun climbing higher in the sky. The silence between them wasn't comfortable yet, but it wasn't painful either. It felt like the quiet after a storm, when the world is still damp with rain but beginning to dry in newfound sunlight. As they pulled into the hospital parking lot, Grace spoke again. "Tom would have wanted this, wouldn't he? Us helping each other?" Ethan thought about his friend's last words. "You've got someone waiting for you." Maybe Tom had known something too, something about the mysterious ways grace works in broken lives. "Yes," he said simply. "I think he would." The steady beep of hospital monitors filled the sterile room like a mechanical heartbeat, each tone marking the fragile rhythm of life hanging in the balance. Emma lay motionless in the oversized hospital bed, her small 7-year-old frame almost swallowed by the sea of white sheets and tangled medical equipment that surrounded her like electronic guardians. Her usually rosy cheeks, which normally glowed with the vitality of childhood, were now pale as morning mist, making the dark purple circles under her closed eyes appear even more pronounced against her porcelain skin. The room itself seemed to hold its breath. Beside her bed, dozens of colorful get-well cards from her second-grade classmates covered every available surface on the windowsill crayon drawings of sunshine and rainbows. Construction paper hearts, with glitter that caught the light, childish handwriting promising to save her seat at lunch. Their cheerful messages created a stark contrast to the room's somber atmosphere, like flowers blooming in a graveyard. Ethan knelt beside the narrow hospital bed, his weathered hands dwarfing Emma's tiny, pale one as he held it with the gentleness of a man who understood how quickly precious things could slip away. His olive-green service jacket, the same one he'd worn to Tom's funeral 3 years ago, was now wrinkled and creased from hours of maintaining this vigil. The fabric bore the weight of his exhaustion. His sleeves rolled up to reveal the faded tattoo on his forearm, the same one Emma had described in her dreams. Grace stood beside him like a sentinel, her favorite cream-colored teacher's sweater wrapped tightly around her shoulders despite the room's oppressive warmth that made the air feel thick and hard to breathe. Her dark hair, usually neat and pulled back for school, hung loose around her face in disheveled strands. Her eyes, red-rimmed from crying and lack of sleep, never left Emma's face, watching with desperate intensity for any sign of change, any flutter of eyelids or twitch of lips that might signal her daughter's return to the world of the living. The late afternoon sun filtered through the Venetian blinds in golden strips, creating a pattern of light and shadow that moved slowly across the polished linoleum floor like the bars of a cage. A nurse had just finished her hourly check of Emma's vitals, her white sneakers squeaking softly against the floor as her quiet footsteps faded down the busy hallway. In the distance, the familiar sounds of hospital life continued, a meal cart's wheels squeaking past the doorway, the distant ring of a telephone at the nurse's station, the muffled conversations of families in other rooms facing their own prayers and fears. Ethan's throat felt like sandpaper as he watched Emma's chest rise and fall with each shallow mechanical breath assisted by the oxygen cannula beneath her nose. The machines tracking her heartbeat beeped in a rhythm that reminded him too painfully of Mara's final days in a room much like this one, where he had sat helplessly watching cancer steal away the woman he loved. But something deep in his chest told him this time was different. This time, he wouldn't just sit in helpless silence, drowning in his own fear and guilt. This time, he would fight back the only way he knew how. "God," he began, his voice rough and unsteady from hours of silent worry. The word felt foreign on his tongue after years of angry silence toward heaven. He cleared his throat, swallowing hard, and tried again with more conviction. "God, if you're listening." His calloused fingers tightened slightly around Emma's small hand, as if he could anchor her to life through touch alone. "Let her stay. Please, just let her stay." Grace's breath caught audibly beside him, a sharp intake that spoke of surprise and desperate hope. She had not heard him pray since the first Sunday they met at church, when his presence had seemed more like penance than worship. Ethan continued, his words coming faster now, more urgent, as if the floodgates of his heart had finally burst open. "Take my pain instead, all of it. The guilt I've carried since Tom." His voice cracked on his best friend's name, the syllable breaking like glass in his throat. "The nightmares that wake me up screaming. The fear that's kept me running from everyone who tries to get close. Just please, let her stay." A single tear rolled down his weathered cheek, splashing onto the white hospital blanket like a small baptism. "She's got so much light in her, God. So much love to give to this broken world. The way she draws those angels, the way she makes Lily laugh, the way she sees good in everyone she meets. The world needs that light more than it needs my guilt." His broad shoulders shook as he fought to keep his voice steady, the words pouring out of him like water from a broken dam. "I'll stop hiding from the life you gave me. I'll face whatever you send my way, the memories, the pain, the fear of loving and losing again. Just don't take another angel home. Not yet. Not when she's got so much living left to do." Grace's trembling hand found his shoulder, her fingers squeezing gently through the worn fabric of his jacket. Her own tears fell freely now, hot drops that spoke of a mother's deepest terror and a woman's broken faith slowly being rebuilt. She added her quiet voice to his prayer, the words barely a whisper. "Please," she breathed. "She's all I have left of hope. My little miracle who came to me when I thought my heart was too broken to love again." Ethan's free hand covered Grace's smaller one on his shoulder, his palm warm and steady against her trembling fingers. Together, they formed an unbroken chain of touch from mother to daughter, connected by the man who had lost so much but was finally learning to reach out again instead of pulling away. "I know I haven't talked to you much since Tom died," Ethan continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, as if he were sharing a secret with the divine. "Since Mara faded away in my arms. Since everything good in my life seemed to turn to ash. But I'm talking now. I'm here, and I'm asking. I'm begging." His thumb traced small, gentle circles on Emma's pale palm, the same way he used to comfort Lily during thunderstorms. "Whatever price there is for her life, I'll pay it. Whatever path you want me to walk, no matter how hard or lonely, I'll walk it. Just let her open those beautiful eyes one more time." The room fell into a profound silence, broken only by the steady beeping of monitors, tracking Emma's fragile heartbeat and the soft whoosh of the oxygen machine breathing for her small lungs. Sunlight continued its slow, ancient dance across the floor, touching the bed where their hands were joined in desperate prayer, casting everything in gold like a Renaissance painting of faith being born from ashes. Then, so faintly they might have imagined it, Emma's fingers twitched in Ethan's gentle grasp. The movement was tiny, barely perceptible, but it sent electricity through both adults like lightning striking twice in the same place. Her eyelids fluttered once, twice, like butterfly wings, testing the air. Grace leaned forward, hardly daring to breathe, her free hand pressed against her mouth to keep from crying out and disturbing whatever miracle was unfolding before them. Emma's eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then finding their faces with the clarity of someone returning from a long journey. A tiny smile touched her pale lips, transforming her wan features into something radiant. "He said thank you," she whispered, her voice thin as tissue paper but clear as church bells. Grace collapsed against Ethan's shoulder, deep sobs shaking her entire body as 3 days of terror and exhaustion poured out of her in waves. Ethan's own face was wet with tears, but these were different from the bitter drops he'd shed at Tom's grave in the dark hours of night. These tears carried the weight of surrender, of awe, of a burden finally set down after being carried too long across too many battlefields. Emma's fingers curled weakly around his, her touch as light as a blessing. "Don't cry," she murmured, her voice growing a little stronger. "The soldier said it's okay now. He's not sad anymore. He said he's proud of you both." Grace's sobs grew stronger, and Ethan wrapped his other arm around her shoulders, supporting her while keeping his hand firmly anchored in Emma's grasp. The late afternoon sun caught the tears on his cheeks, turning them to liquid gold, like the first light of dawn after the longest, darkest night of the soul. The morning sun streamed through the hospital window, casting warm patches of light across Emma's bed. The room felt different now, lighter somehow, as if the heavy cloud of worry had finally lifted. Emma's color had returned, bringing back the gentle pink to her cheeks that had been missing for so long. Ethan sat in the worn vinyl chair beside her bed, watching her chest rise and fall with steady breaths. The doctors had been amazed by her recovery, using words like unprecedented and remarkable. But Ethan knew better. He'd seen enough miracles in combat to recognize one when he saw it. Grace entered quietly, carrying 2 paper cups of coffee. She handed one to Ethan, their fingers brushing briefly. The awkwardness that had existed between them had melted away during their long vigils at Emma's bedside. "The nurse says her numbers are even better today," Grace whispered, settling into the chair opposite Ethan. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a small smile playing at her lips. "Dr. Matthews actually used the word miraculous." Ethan nodded, taking a sip of the hospital coffee. Tom always did have a way of making impossible things happen. Instead of tensing at Tom's name as she once would have, Grace's smile grew warmer. "He does, doesn't he?" Present tense. Emma stirred slightly in her sleep, mumbling something about butterflies. Both adults watched her with tender expressions, their hearts full of gratitude. "Remember how Tom used to say everything happens for a reason?" Grace asked softly, her eyes still on her daughter. "I used to think that was just something people said to make sense of bad things. But now, it feels real." Ethan finished, understanding in his voice. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the morning light growing stronger. A nurse came in to check Emma's vitals, smiling at her improved readings before quietly leaving them alone again. "Tell me something about him," Grace said suddenly. "Something I didn't know. Something from your time together." Ethan leaned back in his chair, memories washing over him. "There was this one time in Afghanistan. We'd been on patrol for hours. Everyone was exhausted and miserable. Tom starts humming this ridiculous song. "Sweet Caroline?" Grace interrupted, laughing softly. "How did you know?" It was his go-to. He'd sing it in the shower, in the car, while doing dishes. Her eyes sparkled with the memory. Well, before we knew it, the whole unit was singing along. Even the grumpiest sergeant couldn't help himself. That was Tom. He could find joy in the darkest places. Grace wiped away a tear, though she was still smiling. He wrote to me about that day. Said it was one of his favorite memories. He wrote about everything, didn't he? Everything. Grace reached into her purse and pulled out a worn envelope. "I found this one last night. It's dated 3 days before." She swallowed hard. "He wrote about you." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Grace unfolded the letter carefully, the paper soft from countless readings. "Tell Grace about my buddy Ethan," she read quietly. "He's the kind of man who carries extra water in his pack for stray dogs, who gives his last protein bar to the new guy, who volunteers for the worst watches so others can sleep. If anything ever happens to me, I hope she meets someone like him." Tears burned in Ethan's eyes. He looked down at his hands, rough and calloused, remembering all they'd done and failed to do. "I was so angry when I found out you were the one he saved," Grace admitted, folding the letter carefully. "But now I understand. He wasn't just saving you that day. He was saving all of us." Emma shifted in her sleep again, and they both watched as she settled, her face peaceful. The morning light caught the get well cards on her windowsill, making the glitter sparkle. "Lily asked me yesterday if angels wear combat boots," Ethan said, his voice rough with emotion. "Because in her dream, Tom was wearing his old uniform but had wings too." Grace laughed softly, wiping away fresh tears. "Emma says he wears a bright light instead of a uniform, but she always mentions his smile. That smile could light up a whole FOB," Ethan remembered. "Forward Operating Base," he explained, seeing Grace's questioning look. "He mentioned those in his letters. Said they felt like summer camp with guns." She shook her head, fondness mixing with old grief. The hospital corridor outside was beginning to buzz with morning activity, but in Emma's room, time seemed to move differently. Each shared story, each quiet laugh, felt like another stitch, healing an old wound. "You know what's strange?" Grace said, watching Emma sleep. "I used to think holding on to grief was a way of keeping Tom close, but letting it go, sharing these memories, it makes him feel more present than ever." Ethan understood exactly what she meant. The guilt he'd carried for so long had been a heavy shield, keeping everything else out, including hope. Emma's eyes fluttered open, and she smiled sleepily at them both. "I had a good dream," she mumbled. "Yeah?" Grace leaned forward, stroking her daughter's hair. "What about, sweetheart?" "The soldier was having a picnic with us. He said he was happy." Grace's eyes met Ethan's across the bed. In that moment, something shifted between them, like the last piece of a puzzle falling into place. "Maybe Tom saved you because he knew we'd need you," Grace said softly, reaching across Emma's bed to take Ethan's hand. Her touch was warm, steady, full of forgiveness and possibility. Ethan squeezed her hand gently, feeling truly at peace for the first time in years. Together, they watched Emma drift back to sleep, her face serene in the morning light. The October morning dawned crisp and clear over Willow Creek, painting the small town in shades of amber and gold. Red and orange leaves drifted lazily on the gentle breeze as townspeople gathered around the newly restored war memorial, their breath visible in small puffs against the cool air. Bright banners fluttered cheerfully against the deep blue sky, and neat rows of folding chairs faced the gleaming stone monument that now stood proud and whole after months of careful restoration. Ethan adjusted his old service jacket, the one he hadn't worn in 3 years, feeling the familiar weight of the medals on his chest. The brass buttons caught the morning sunlight, throwing tiny spots of light across his hands. Beside him, Lily wore her very best dress, a light blue one with tiny white flowers that matched Emma's perfectly. Grace had helped coordinate their outfits the night before, and the girls had giggled with delight at looking like twins. The 2 little girls held hands tightly, whispering secrets and pointing out familiar faces in the crowd. Their excitement was infectious, and Ethan found himself smiling despite the nervous flutter in his stomach. Grace stood close beside him, close enough that her shoulder brushed his arm whenever she moved. She wore a simple cream sweater that brought out the warm honey color of her eyes, and her dark hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders. "You okay?" Grace asked softly, her voice barely audible above the gentle murmur of the gathering crowd. She'd noticed how Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he smoothed down his jacket for the third time. He nodded, managing a small but genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Just feels different now." Good. Different. The words carried weight, months of healing, of learning to forgive himself, of discovering that love could grow even in soil watered by grief. The mayor approached the wooden podium that had been set up in front of the memorial, her voice carrying clearly across the gathered crowd of nearly 200 people. Veterans sat in the front rows, some in wheelchairs, others standing tall despite their years. Families clustered together, children sitting cross-legged on blankets spread across the grass. "Today, we honor not just the memory of our fallen heroes," the mayor began, her words measured and reverent, "but the spirit of community that brought this memorial back to life. For too long, this sacred place had been forgotten, weathered by time and neglect. But love never forgets." Ethan's gaze drifted to the fresh stonework, remembering the long summer days spent under the blazing sun, restoring each section with painstaking care. He'd worked alongside other veterans, men who understood without words the weight of survivors' guilt, the struggle to find meaning in continuing to breathe when brothers hadn't. They'd shared quiet understanding as they cleaned tarnished plaques with toothbrushes, replaced worn stones, and rebuilt crumbling foundations. Grace had been there through it all, bringing ice-cold lemonade in mason jars and thick sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. She'd set up a small folding table under the old oak tree, creating a makeshift lunch station that became the heart of their worksite. Emma and Lily had spent countless afternoons making colorful chalk drawings on the sidewalk nearby, their laughter mixing with the sounds of hammers and quiet conversation. "I'd like to especially thank our volunteers," the mayor continued, her eyes finding Ethan in the crowd. "Particularly Ethan Cole, whose dedication to this project went above and beyond the call of duty. His vision and tireless work transformed this memorial from a forgotten monument into a living testament to honor and remembrance." Ethan felt his cheeks warm as scattered applause rippled through the crowd, growing stronger as people turned to look at him. Several veterans nodded in his direction, their faces showing the kind of respect that could only pass between those who'd served. Grace squeezed his hand, her fingers intertwining with his, and he could feel the pride radiating from her like warmth from a hearth. The ceremony continued with prayers from local pastors, speeches from the VFW commander, and a haunting rendition of taps played by a young trumpet player from the high school band. But Ethan found himself focused on the central plaque, the one bearing Tom's name in letters that seemed to glow in the morning light. The inscription read, "Staff Sergeant Thomas Parker, greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends." Emma had been holding something carefully throughout the entire ceremony, her small hands cupped protectively around a smooth river rock. She'd painted it herself the evening before, sitting at Grace's kitchen table with her tongue poking out in concentration. The stone was covered with careful swirls of blue and gold colors that seemed to capture both sky and sunlight. In the center, written in a child's careful printing with a fine brush, were the words, "Love never dies." Grace noticed Emma's fidgeting and nodded permission. Emma walked forward with the solemn purpose that only children possess when they know something is important. The crowd fell silent, sensing the sacred nature of the moment, as she approached Tom's plaque. She placed the painted stone at the base of the monument with reverent care, then touched the bronze letters of his name gently, tracing each one with her fingertip. "Thank you for watching over us," she whispered, her words carrying in the still air to those closest. "And thank you for sending us, Mr. Ethan." Lily moved to stand beside her best friend, taking her hand in a gesture of solidarity that made several adults in the crowd wipe their eyes. The two girls stood there, small and strong against the vast morning sky, their shadows merging on the memorial's base like a single, unbroken bond. Ethan felt tears prick his eyes, the familiar sting of emotion he no longer tried to suppress. The guilt that had weighed him down for so many years felt different now, transformed through Grace's love and the children's innocent faith into something closer to gratitude. He understood now that Tom's sacrifice hadn't been about one man being worth more than another. It had been about love choosing to act, about courage making a split-second decision that would ripple through time. Grace leaned against him, her warmth seeping through his jacket, and he could feel her quiet strength, could sense her own journey from bitter anger to acceptance. They'd both learned that healing didn't mean forgetting, it meant carrying love forward instead of carrying pain. The mayor invited everyone to explore the restored memorial and visit the new additions. As the crowd began to disperse, some moving toward the refreshment table set up nearby, others gathering around the memorial to read plaques and share stories, Ethan remained rooted in place. He took in every detail with fresh eyes, the fresh white paint on the flagpole that now flew both the American flag and the Paumia flag, the new wooden benches where elderly veterans and their families could sit and remember, the carefully tended garden of memory stones that children from Willow Creek Elementary had helped plant and paint during their field trip last month. "Look, Daddy," Lily called out, her voice bright with wonder, as she pointed to a small butterfly that had landed delicately on Emma's painted stone. Its wings were brilliant yellow, almost golden in the sunlight. "It's yellow like sunshine." Emma's face lit up with recognition and joy, her eyes wide with the kind of wonder that adults spend lifetimes trying to recapture. "Mr. Tom always said yellow was the color of hope," she said matter-of-factly, as if this were common knowledge everyone should share. "He told me in my dreams that hope is what makes sad things beautiful again." Grace and Ethan exchanged wondering glances over the children's heads, no longer questioning Emma's mysterious connection to Tom. They'd learned to accept the inexplicable gifts that sometimes came wrapped in a child's innocent wisdom. The girls ran off to explore the other plaques, their laughter carrying on the autumn air like music. They moved from stone to stone, Emma reading names aloud while Lily picked up fallen leaves to use as bookmarks in her little picture book. Their joy was infectious, drawing smiles from the adults around them. Grace turned to face Ethan fully, her eyes soft with understanding and something deeper, a love that had grown slowly, carefully, built on shared grief and mutual healing. "You know," she said, her voice thoughtful, "I used to think closure meant letting go completely, but maybe it's about holding on differently. Maybe it's about carrying love forward instead of carrying pain." Ethan nodded, words catching in his throat as he watched a young father lift his toddler to touch one of the plaques, explaining in simple words about heroes and sacrifice. He looked at Tom's plaque again, at the small painted stone Emma had placed there like an offering, at the butterfly that still hadn't flown away, as if it were standing guard. "He's finally home," Ethan whispered to Grace, his voice rough with emotion but steady with newfound peace. "And maybe, we are too." Grace's hand found his, their fingers intertwining, naturally, comfortably. "We are," she said simply. And in those two words was a promise, a future, a family rebuilt from the ashes of loss. The morning sun climbed higher, warming their faces as they stood together, shoulders touching, watching their daughters explore the memorial with the fearless curiosity of childhood. Emma was explaining something to Lily with animated gestures, while Lily nodded seriously and added her own observations. The weight of the past felt different now, not gone, but transformed by love and time and faith into something that could finally heal instead of harm. Above them, leaves continued their gentle dance in the October breeze, spiraling down like nature's confetti to celebrate this moment of peace. The bright banners waved like colorful promises against the endless blue sky, and the restored memorial stood proud and whole, not just a monument to what was lost, but a testament to what could be rebuilt through faith, hope, and the courage to love again despite the risk of loss. As the butterfly finally took flight, rising in lazy circles toward the sun, Ethan felt something else take wing inside his chest, not the heavy guilt he'd carried for so long, but something lighter, something that felt remarkably like gratitude for the gift of this ordinary, extraordinary day. The evening light softened into a warm glow as Ethan opened his front door, welcoming Grace and Emma inside. The aroma of pot roast and fresh-baked rolls filled the air. Lily bounced on her toes, eager to show Emma the table she'd helped set with Ethan's good dishes, the ones that had belonged to Mara's mother. "Something smells amazing," Grace said, hanging her light jacket on the coat rack. Emma clutched a folder of drawings to her chest, her cheeks pink with excitement. Ethan's home felt different tonight. The usual emptiness had given way to warmth and life. He'd cleaned thoroughly, arranged fresh flowers in a mason jar centerpiece, and even dug out the old candlesticks from the china cabinet. "Lily insisted on using the fancy plates," he said, running a hand through his hair with a sheepish smile. Said it was a special occasion. "It is," Lily declared, taking Emma's hand, "because we're all together now." The words hung in the air like a blessing. Grace's eyes met Ethan's, and something unspoken passed between them. Gratitude, perhaps, or wonder at how life could surprise you with joy when you least expected it. In the kitchen, steam rose from serving dishes arranged on the counter. Ethan had prepared everything himself: pot roast with vegetables, homemade rolls, and apple pie cooling on the windowsill. It wasn't fancy restaurant fare, but it was made with care and attention to detail. "I didn't know you could cook like this," Grace said, helping him carry dishes to the table. 3 years of being a single dad," he replied. "You learn fast when mac and cheese doesn't cut it anymore." They settled around the table, its surface glowing in the soft light of the candles. Lily and Emma sat side by side, their faces illuminated by the dancing flames. Grace reached for Ethan's hand as they said grace, and Emma led them in a sweet, simple prayer that made everyone's eyes misty. The meal was filled with conversation and laughter. Emma told stories from school, while Lily shared her latest adventure in their backyard treehouse. Grace talked about her students' autumn art projects, and Ethan found himself sharing funny memories from his own school days. "Remember when you tried to convince your teacher that your dog ate your homework?" Grace asked Lily, who giggled. "But we don't even have a dog," Emma exclaimed, and everyone burst out laughing. After the main course, Grace stood to help with dessert. "Come on, Lily," she called. "Show me where your dad keeps the ice cream for the pie." While they clattered around in the kitchen, Emma pulled her folder onto her lap. "Mr. Ethan," she said softly, "I made something for you." Ethan leaned closer as she spread her drawings across the cleared table. They were done in colored pencil pictures of angels with golden wings and soldiers in uniform. In one, a soldier with familiar features stood beside a little girl in a blue dress. In another, an angel watched over 2 families sharing a meal. "That's all of us," Emma explained, pointing to the figures. "And see, there's Mr. Tom too. He's the angel." Ethan's throat tightened. The drawings were simple but somehow captured everything: loss and love, pain and healing, the sacred thread that had brought them all together. He could almost feel Tom's presence, not as the weight of guilt he'd carried for so long, but as a gentle benediction. "These are beautiful, Emma," he managed. "Thank you." Grace and Lily returned with dessert just then, breaking the moment with a cheerful clink of plates and spoons. The apple pie was still warm, vanilla ice cream melting slowly beside each slice. As they enjoyed their dessert, Ethan looked around his dining room. The walls that had seemed so empty for so long now felt full of life. Children's laughter echoed where silence used to reign. Grace's smile caught the candlelight, and he found himself remembering how to hope again. Later, while the girls cleaned up their art supplies and played in the living room, Ethan and Grace stepped out onto the front porch. The night air was cool but not cold. Stars scattered across the dark sky like diamonds on velvet. A cricket chirped somewhere in the garden. Ethan leaned against the porch railing, looking up at the constellations. The same stars he'd gazed at in Afghanistan now seemed to shine with different meaning. "I never thought I'd have this again," he said quietly. The words felt raw and honest in the darkness. Grace moved to stand beside him, her shoulder brushing his. Inside, they could hear Lily and Emma's muffled giggles, the sound of happiness finding its way home. "You were always meant to," she replied simply, her voice soft but certain. They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead, while behind them, through the window, candlelight continued to warm the home they were all building together. The early morning sun painted the cemetery in shades of amber and gold, casting long shadows across the rows of white stones. 1 year had passed since the war memorial dedication, and now Memorial Day had come full circle. The grass was still damp with dew as Ethan Cole walked between the graves, his daughter Lily's small hand tucked securely in his. Grace Parker held Emma's hand on his other side, their steps falling into an easy rhythm. The morning air carried the sweet scent of fresh-cut grass and blooming flowers. American flags dotted the landscape like tiny sentinels, their colors bright against the pale stones. Lily wore a yellow sundress that caught the morning light, making her look like a small ray of sunshine. She carried a bouquet of daisies, Tom's favorite, they'd learned. Emma's blue dress rippled in the gentle breeze, reminding Ethan of that first morning they'd met here, when a little girl's words had changed everything. They walked past familiar names, some adorned with fresh flowers, others with weather-worn mementos. Ethan's military jacket felt lighter this year, as if some of the weight he'd carried had finally lifted. Grace squeezed his hand as they approached Tom's grave, her touch warm and reassuring. The heartstone Emma had placed months ago still rested against the headstone, its painted message slightly faded but clear. Love never dies. Fresh flowers from other visitors surrounded it, proof that Tom's memory lived on in more hearts than just theirs. Emma stepped forward first, her movements careful and reverent. Her health had improved dramatically over the past year, her cheeks now rosy with life. She knelt before the stone, her small hands clasped together. "Thank you for watching over us," Emma whispered, her voice carrying on the morning air, "and for helping Daddy find us." She touched the stone gently, the way she often did, as if greeting an old friend. Lily moved forward next, clutching her tiny American flag. She placed it carefully beside the heartstone, making sure it stood straight and proud. Her face held the solemn understanding that sometimes came over children in sacred moments. "We take good care of them, Mr. Tom," Lily said softly, glancing at her father and Grace. "Just like you asked in my dreams." Ethan felt tears prick his eyes as he stepped forward. His hand rose in a crisp salute, soldier to soldier, brother to brother. The morning sun warmed his face as memories washed over him. Tom's laugh, his unwavering loyalty, his final act of sacrifice that had led to this moment. Grace slipped her arm around his waist, leaning into him. She'd worn her hair down today, the way Tom had always liked it. Her other hand held a small bouquet of wildflowers, which she now placed beside the grave. "You would have loved this," she murmured, touching the stone. "All of us together. It's exactly what you would have wanted." The four of them stood together in comfortable silence, letting the morning wrap around them like a gentle embrace. The past year had brought so many changes: Emma's recovery, Grace and Ethan's wedding 2 months ago, their families blending into something new and beautiful. Through it all, they'd felt Tom's presence, guiding them toward healing. Church bells began to ring in the distance, their clear tones floating across the cemetery. It was time for the morning service, where they would join their community in remembering all those who had given their lives for others. "Ready?" Grace asked softly, looking at each of them in turn. Emma and Lily nodded, already reaching for each other's hands. The girls had become inseparable, true sisters in every way that mattered. They started down the path toward the cemetery gate, their dresses catching the morning light. As they reached the iron gates, a sudden breeze swept through the cemetery. Emma's blue dress danced in the wind, and they all turned to look back at Tom's grave. The flowers they'd placed there swayed gently, as if touched by an invisible hand. The flag Lily had planted stood perfectly straight, its colors bright against the white stone. Ethan felt it then, that familiar presence, the weight of a hand on his shoulder that had guided him through his darkest moments. His eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of gratitude, of joy, of understanding that love truly never dies. Looking up at the clear morning sky, Ethan smiled through his tears. "Thank you, brother," he whispered, his voice carrying all the weight of the journey that had brought them here. The church bells continued their song as the small family turned toward their future, walking together into the promise of a new day. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Ethan Cole, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.